I wanted to talk about the situation happening right now here in America with the wokeification of schools and the school system. Come on, guy, you gotta give me some room here. Because even though Donald Trump won the presidency and he set back woke in a big way, culturally, we have turned away from woke. We are winning the battle of culture. We won the political war, but the ideological war continues. You see, woke was not something new. Woke is just a terminology that we gave this latest reincarnation, or this latest, yes, reincarnation of Marxism, where Marxism pitted classes of people against each other, the have versus have-nots, which didn't work out too well because capitalism succeeded too much. And as any Marxist writer will tell you, you can't have a revolution without people who feel oppressed or displaced or like they're not getting their fair share of a society that they're working towards, which then Marxism pits them against each other to destabilize and cause a revolution and have the have-nots take over the government and then oppress the elites or the haves. And when I say the elites or the haves, to be elite in a socialist society, it can be something as small as having a few extra cooking pans that someone else has, or having a car that someone else doesn't have. So Marxism failed in that aspect. But with this demonic leftist ideology, the ideology of resentment is what it actually is, where you resent someone because you don't have something, despite having an economic system in capitalism that has freed more people from the abject poverty than any other system in human history. They say that's not enough. And what they've done is they've actually changed Marxism now to cultural Marxism or neo-Marxism, if you will. And what that says is it's not about someone having more than you. It's about someone having a different class of society, a different skin color, a different identity than you that oppresses you. And this is where you get identity politics, where identity politics has now switched class fakes Marxism for racial-based Marxism, which says that if you have white skin, you are an oppressor, and everyone else, any minority, which is really interesting to say because if you look at the entire world as a whole, white people are a minority, but identity politics will say that your identity is who you are, not your deeds, not your merits, not your morality, not how hard of a worker you are, but in fact, it's your identity. And no matter how hard you work, for instance, in old classical Marxism, you can go from one class to the next depending on how much money you made. It wasn't about skin color. And since that didn't work out too well, they now say, by the way, I'm running a bit more cautiously today because this massive peacoat I have is flying out the sides and I don't want it to fly out the back, which I'm actually sitting on it right now to stop the back from flying out. But identity-based Marxism, or identity politics, says that no matter how hard you work, no matter how much money you make, no matter what your position in society is, you are still oppressed because of things like your skin color, because of things like your sexual orientation, because of things like what you believe, and that we have to overthrow the existing power structures in order to have a perfect society. So, woke, it's just identity-based Marxism which is a replacement for classical Marxism. And once you understand that, then a lot more makes sense. Looks like we got some traffic here, which is what I was expecting. I'm surprised we didn't get it sooner. But again, it is the middle of the day here in Hollywood, so. And what this identity-based Marxism is, or what it does, is it infiltrates the minds of people and makes it so that no matter how hard you work, as I said, no matter what your position of society is, you're still oppressed. So you can't ever escape it. The only way to fix it is by overthrowing the systems in government or the systems of power that have oppressed you. And anyone who is part of one of these oppressive classes, come on, Tesla, you gotta move. People drive crazy around here, as you can see. I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to keep your vehicle in the middle of the lane, right? But you never know who can jut out, who can try to cross lanes quickly without signaling. So you always have to keep your eye literally on the road. And not only that, but you have to try to predict what's going to happen. This is why motorcycle riding is a very focus intensive endeavor. And this is why when you ride for a few hours, especially in city, I would say anything over than an hour, if you're driving in traffic or you're driving in the city, you're actually exhausted after, especially in the beginning. Now, not so much, once you get used to it. I've been riding for 25 years. But if you're not used to it, your mind is physically exhausted when you get done. And your mind burns a ton of calories because it's thinking. It's a computer. So, now going back to this leftist ideology, this woke ideology, this identity politic ideology, it started, you can say it started with Lenin, who was a leader of the Russian Revolution when Russia guys, this is not normal. I don't really experience this many people in the middle of the lane. This is people are just not paying attention today, but this is abnormal. And when I stop speaking for a moment, it's because I'm really concentrating. I think we're out of the hole now. I had to use 100% of my mental faculties for that one. And it was because one of the lanes was shut down. Now, to go back to what Lenin did, is in the early 1900s when Lenin took over the country in the Bolshevik Revolution, he implemented the beginnings of this ideology here, but it was still more class-based. And then Mao Zedong, I would say, really was the first person to institute this identity base. He actually created different classes of people. I forget the exact number, but it was something like 5 to 10. And what happened was, they would classify you as a certain status depending on how much money you had, your family status, and other things. And he indoctrinated the school children and made them become little red book holding communists. And I say little red book because there was a little red book that Mao Zedong, who was a person who brought China to communism, made everyone have a copy of and keep it with them at all times to be indoctrinated. And then what he did was he shut down the universities and what he called the Colored Revolution or the Red Revolution, and he created an army called the Red Guard, composed of children, young adults, people in universities. Then he canceled universities for an entire year, and he told the students, or the Red Guard is what he called them, to go and get rid of the four olds. The four old things of society that he wanted to eradicate to become a perfect communist country. One of them was old culture, customs, and more. This was after he was ousted from power because he did something very stupid called the Great Leap Forward. He said China was going to leap forward and be the world's #1 manufacturer of certain things. I believe it was lumber, maybe steel, I forget the exact ones. And he did stuff so stupid. For instance, one example of how stupid he was, there was a famine in China. And he said that the reason that there was a famine is because of the crows. Yes, the crow, like the bird. So he instructed his little minions, the people who have been indoctrinated, to chase the crows. Yeah, to chase them. To not give them any rest. And there's videos of this. You can see, I mean, there were millions of people across the country. Nice human HRC banner there. There were millions of people chasing crows all over the country, if you could believe this. Literally chasing them, not letting them rest or perch. Well, tons of crows died, as you can imagine, from exhaustion, from being unable to eat, etc. And that caused an even bigger famine because, come to find out, what Mao Zedong didn't understand was that ecology is very complex and interconnected, and the crows actually played a big part in that. So there was an even bigger famine. And that's part of the reason why he was ousted. Anyway, Mao Zedong brought identity-based Marxism into the world in China. And then a man by the name of Antonio Gramsci, who was an Italian Marxist, who was actually put in jail by Mussolini, wrote what are called the prison notebooks. And in his notebooks, he's read Marx, he's read many people, he saw what was going on in China, he saw, etc. And he said a lot, but specifically what I'm talking about is that he said in order to cause a revolution and break down this power structure, we have to take over culture, we have to take over religion, we have to take over politics, and we have to take over entertainment. And we have to take over law. And if you can take over those four things, then you can break the hegemonic power that these oppressors have instituted in society. Now you take all that and you get woke. Give it 100 years or so, about 100 years after that, and you get woke. And that is fundamentally the problem that we're having right now with these woke people, with not even liberals, but progressives and leftists. People who want to see the system be destroyed. Now, what's ironic about these leftists who are acting like fascists, removing freedoms, getting rid of freedom of speech, and who live by a cult-like mentality where you can't think your own things, or else you'll be shunned from the group, is extremely fascist. And the reason Hitler, in part, is so vilified in history is because he killed a lot of Jews. But the leftists are acting like Hitler, but they're saying Jews are the problem, which is incredibly ironic to think about. So you see all these leftists that protest and they think they're doing, I'm not even going to say God's work, because they are anti-religion. Communism hates religion, because religion cannot compete with, or communism cannot compete with a strong moral foundation, which comes from religion. You can't have two competing ideas in a marketplace that doesn't allow ideas. This is one of the reasons why communists are so anti-religious. The reason why communists and leftists have taken over churches like the Methodist Church or the Episcopalian. And they actually they've infiltrated, gotten positions of power, and then try to change the doctrine of the church and say, we need to include these things to be tolerant, and the church body doesn't agree, and they splinter off and they create their own branch. That's happened with the Methodist Church, which actually fits the Gramscian, or John Gramsci's version of taking over religion by offering them a religion, quote unquote, that's actually not the religion that it was. That changes things. They're making a new religion. So we see purple-haired pastors or deacons or priests or whatever you want to call them. This is what happened there. So just, I have about 5 minutes left, so I get off on my exit. But whenever you see these things happening, know that it didn't happen overnight. Woke didn't come out of nowhere. See, many conservatives it did. And at the very beginning, they had no idea what it was, no idea how to fight it. But because of people like Charlie Kirk, rest in peace, and other people who figure this stuff out, like James Lindsay, they're able to fight it, able to understand it, to fight it, and went back to culture, which is what we are doing now. The woke has not died. So after communism was, I guess they call it, defeated here in America in the 50s, we thought that the animal was put to bed. But what happened, in fact, was that we cut off the head of the snake, and the snake grew 8 heads. I was going a little too fast, which I know you can't hear the audio, so I slowed down. I didn't realize how fast I was going. But just know that this woke ideology is one of resentment, is one of anger, is one of oppressive thoughts, it's one of anti-freedom, it's anti-religion, it's anti-meritocracy. And all it is a cult. So whenever you hear people saying they're woke, now you know exactly what they mean by that. And you know exactly what they want. They want a society where they rule, where their ideas are the ones that define the power structures. They want to basically oppress the oppressors. Because all that happens is when you take over society like socialists have done, is you oppress the people you say have oppressed you. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section. I'll do more of these, and I'll see you next time.